Hello, and welcome to today's conversation, a holiday shopping season like no other. I'm Bennett Richardson, General Manager of Protocol. Thank you for joining us. At Protocol, we aim to arm you as decision makers in technology, business, and policy with actionable news and analysis that can help you do your job. The 2021 holiday shopping season is shaping up to be a bumpy ride. Retailers are struggling to refill shelves due to supply chain disruptions. Consumer electronics makers are scrambling to make up for chipset shortages, and bargain hunters are finding that deals aren't what they used to be. How do these issues affect holiday shopping on Black Friday, Cyber Monday yesterday, and beyond? And where does the industry go from here? Our panel of experts will dive in and share their perspectives. I hope you will join our conversation by tweeting your questions with the hashtag #ProtocolNextUp. And if you're not already subscribed, don't forget to sign up for Next Up and Protocol's family of newsletters at protocol.com/newsletters. Now, let's get to it. I'm excited to introduce our moderator, Janko Rutgers, Protocol Senior Reporter and author of the Protocol Next Up newsletter, to introduce our panel. Janko, take it away.
Thanks, Bennett. Thanks for this introduction. And thanks again to everybody joining us this Tuesday to this discussion. And before we get into the meat of it, to talk about all these things, supply chain issues, pandemic shopping, post-pandemic shopping, all these things, I want to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves really quick. Tell us maybe in 3-4 sentences who you are, which company you're with, and what your role is there. And let's do this in the order of the tiles here on our screen. So let's start with Emily for this one. Emily, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I lead insights at Foursquare, and I'm excited to be here today. For those of you who might be less familiar with Foursquare, or perhaps still think of the check-in app from back in the day, we are currently the leading independent location-based platform, and location is at the center of everything we do. So it helps us understand how people move throughout the real world, and how those patterns change over time. And we use that knowledge and our proprietary technologies to help brands, developers, marketers, and analysts understand consumers and engage with them. And as the senior strategist of data and insights at Foursquare, I help synthesize our location data into actionable insights for brands, publishers, and platforms to capitalize on those behavioral trends.
All right, great. Next up, Vibhu. Tell us a bit about yourself and about Beta.
Sure. I'm Vibhu. I founded Beta 2015, and we find the world's best upcoming tech products, innovation products, put them in our stores that are in the US, globally as well. We are the best place to find Christmas gifts, I promise you. The stuff we have is incredible. If you go to beta.com, you can see we also recently launched a full live streaming platform. So we live stream every day, pretty much all day from our stores, unboxing cool products and showing people how they work.
I'm definitely going to ask you about that later. But before we get to that, let's get to Daryl first. Tell us a bit about your background and what you're up to these days.
I'm Daryl Riddle. I am the founder of PB&J Labs, founded in 2013, right after I left Woot.com. PB&J Labs takes a lot of our learnings from Woot, and we essentially allow manufacturers and brands to tap into the deal segment online. And so we help manufacturers and brands market their products through innovative technologies and deal places like Woot and Groupon, Amazon Goldbox, those sort of deal locations.
And you just mentioned Woot like really briefly, but we also have to underline that you are one of the co-founders of Woot.
Yes, going way back about 18 years ago, we started Woot. Yes.
Great. All right. Maybe we can start out with Emily. And you already mentioned that some people still think of Foursquare as this check-in app, social location-based check-in app. Nowadays, it's much more of a data business. Maybe really briefly tell us how you gather that data, and then you can elaborate a little bit more on what that has been telling you about how the pandemic has shaped shopping and how that has evolved over the last couple of months.
Yeah, definitely. So we receive our location data from a number of sources, mainly our owned and operated applications, You might be familiar with the Foursquare City Guide or Swarm. And then we also use the apps that use location tools. So when app developers permit us to use such data, as well as carefully vetted suppliers, some of which who are named on our website. In terms of how we analyze that data, we analyze consumer behavior based on foot traffic patterns, and we have millions of Americans that make up our always on panel. And in terms of scale, we measure roughly 3 billion visits per month globally. And then for the purpose of our insights reports, such as the annual Black Friday analysis we do, all of that data is anonymized, aggregated, and normalized against US Census data to remove any age, gender, and geographical bias.
And so you did a lot of number crunching on last Black Friday already, but you've also been looking at more recent trends. So what were the biggest takeaways on how the pandemic has changed holiday shopping and shopping since?
Yeah, certainly there was a lot of change that happened in just the last year. But before kind of talking into more recent data and predictions for the current holiday season, we can kind of cover some of those findings from last year. And so contrary to what I think a lot expected to be the case, location data actually proved that people were not afraid to shop in stores last holiday season. In fact, we were seeing that a lot of retail categories did surprisingly well in terms of foot traffic, and some actually outperformed the previous holiday season entirely. And we saw that that was the case with big box, hardware, furniture, home stores, sporting goods, and electronics. All of these categories surpassed 2019 levels in terms of foot traffic. And this wasn't the case for all categories, of course. We did see that department stores, clothing stores, and shopping malls saw a decrease in penetration compared to the previous holiday. And I think there's a number of factors that come into play here. I think one, consumers were still heavily avoiding the more typically crowded spaces like shopping malls and department stores. And then in terms of clothing stores, a lot of the dressing rooms remained closed off to shoppers. And so perhaps people were more inclined to shop apparel online for that reason. The other factor here is that one-stop shopping was a major trend last year, which is why we see that increase in penetration for big box stores compared to previous holiday seasons. Prior to COVID, people were visiting multiple specialty retail shops for things like pet supplies or beauty products or groceries. But due to COVID, these consumers were making fewer trips out of the house and therefore more heavily relying on big box stores to shop for everyday necessities all in one place. And then I think lastly, the idea of this try before you buy mentality was played a major role for electronics, hardware, and home furniture stores. For example, pricier purchases like home furniture or electronics typically necessitate shopping around and visiting multiple stores in order to make an informed decision, even if they end up making that purchase online.
All right. Well, maybe before we get into the more recent trends, we can also check in with Vibhu on how that has played out for a bit on the ground, sort of, so to speak, in your stores. I remember early on in the pandemic, you were actually tweeting about that a lot and blogging too, about really changing and dropping off traffic, and then it was coming back in some regions and not in others. How is it looking these days, and how has shopping changed in your stores?
Yeah, so I was tweeting out week by week traffic recovery numbers in our locations using our camera data. It was pretty accurate at the door. Yeah, and we probably started to see like major recovery happening in April, May when people were getting vaccinated, the general population. We have half of our stores today are in the Bay Area, so the Bay Area as a market, I think, has recovered differently from for example, Houston, which even last year was recovering very, very quickly. Coming into this kind of Q4, we're seeing probably 70% on average of 2 years ago. Last year we didn't see the recovery Emily's talking about. I think electronics is a pretty broad definition. Maybe it means things like TV. The things we sell are not things you need, for sure. They're things you want. I was just looking at our numbers this morning from the last weekend cycle here. So Black Friday, in stores is up about 10% year over year, but the full weekend was up about 50%. So I think the Friday itself was a little bit more metered for us, and the weekend was pretty strong. We still have a ways to go to get back to 2019, for sure. And there's so many factors that when you have a small sample size like us that can change the numbers one way or another. We're in New York, Bay Area. One thing that hasn't come back is tourism, and that's something that drives probably 30% of our overall traffic. So without that coming back, we'll never see the full recovery that we back to 2019, I would say.
So we are seeing some people coming back, not everybody yet, but we're seeing some people come back. But as they go back in stores, they're now also facing a different reality with all the supply chain issues that we've been hearing about, with chip shortages, with shipping delays, and so forth. So not all the products are available. Some may be less discounted than in previous years. And I'm interested, Daryl, we talked a couple of weeks ago about some of the issues that you've been facing. You actually had containers that were caught up in all of this mess. I think I remember one container in particular had some toys in it, and you were waiting for it, and it was coming down to the line. Maybe can you retell that story a little bit again? And
sure.
I'm really interested. Did you actually get that container in time?
We are still waiting on that container. We felt like we were kind of staying ahead of the problems as we heard about issues in Long Beach and on the West Coast. We started to shift our deliveries to ports on the East Coast to try to avoid some of that. The issues you run into there is it takes longer. You've got to go down through the Panama Canal, and so you have a little bit longer time on water. And in particular, this one container that we're still waiting on, it did get to the port eventually, but then we ran into all of the issues of they had chassis available to load the containers, but they didn't have enough drivers to get the chassis out of the yard. And then once it got out to the yard, it got to a warehouse to be devanned, and there were delays there because they didn't have enough staff to work through that. We did get word this morning that it did finally leave the warehouse yesterday en route to our warehouse, so we will hopefully have it this week. But even doing our best to avoid the known issues, we just stumbled into all kinds of other issues, and I think that pretty accurately describes what every supplier and manufacturer I've talked to has expressed this year. Even with their best plans of trying to resolve those issues and be ahead of them, there are other issues cropping up that are delaying the arrival of their goods.
Yeah, it seems like especially that last mile or the last couple hundreds of miles seem to be a big issue there. Mm-hmm. Actually, was on a earnings call the other day where one of the consumer electronics companies was saying they were trying to hire truckers, which is nothing these companies usually do. They leave that to others, but they were going in and trying to get some more trucks out there to get their wares out in time. Vibhu, how has that played out for you? It's not just consumer electronics, obviously, that you're selling, but it's a big part of your business. How much have you seen in terms of delays, in terms of inability to get some of these things, shortages? How much has that impacted you?
Coming into September is when we start to really finalize our holiday assortment with our brand partners, and say we had dozens and dozens of brands that told us that they weren't sure they would get things in time, and so certainly like a huge percentage of our total partners opted not to extend themselves in the stores to retain a smaller inventory set for their site. And yeah, if you go through our .com site, you'll see there are definitely products that you just can't get this year, and they're just out of stock. We work with really small companies, and medium-sized companies, and I'd say that they're the most affected by this on a kind of a percentage basis. They don't get prioritized, and hopefully we'll see. I listened to Ryan Peterson at Flexport saying that he doesn't know what the solution actually is. So I'm curious to see, how long some of these issues last. But we probably missed out on, 50, 60 different products that we would have loved to carry.
Darius, had you experienced too that if you're one of the smaller guys, if you have just that one container on that one ship, that it's much harder to do anything about it really, as opposed to the big guys that maybe switch to air freight or have some other levers there?
Yeah, absolutely. And even I saw a story yesterday about how Walmart had addressed the situation for some of their Black Friday promo deals. They had gone out and found property in California and just rented a huge piece of property so that they could pull the containers. They own their own trucking fleet, so they could go in and pull the containers out of the dockyard and make sure that they were able to prioritize their products. Well, Walmart can do that. Amazon can do that. The big guys can do that, and the smaller brands don't. They just don't have the ability to do that. So it is definitely I think affected the smaller brands and manufacturers more, in that if their stuff is stuck, it's all stuck, and there's not much of a way out for them.
Emily, how has that affected how consumers are shopping these days? Are you seeing some of these supply chain issues reflected in foot traffic? Are people like going to different stores, to more stores, or how does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're seeing the impact of that play out in real time. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we've used index foot traffic as a way to understand relative growth or decline in traffic from a given benchmark. And so recently we pulled data looking at growth from August through the current holiday season, so right up until Black Friday, and compared that to relative growth during the same time frame last year. And we saw that categories like hardware stores, home furniture, electronics, interestingly, all of these categories have been highly impacted by the recent supply chain disruption and stock issues. And we're seeing the direct correlation of an uptick in traffic to these categories just this year during the holidays. And so we can infer that, these categories are seeing an uptick because the fact that people aren't able to get things in stock online, it's driving them directly into stores to buy it in real time. Another noteworthy trend we're seeing, and arguably the most interesting, is that a lot of these categories, big box hardware, electronics included, they're all seeing a larger variety of shoppers visiting them. They're all seeing a larger number of distinct visits to chains within those categories, meaning people are visiting a larger variety of big box stores now more than ever, meaning that they're likely visiting direct competitors if they can't find something in stock at their preferred retailer.
So they're checking everywhere whether they kind of can find a PS5 anywhere, basically.
Absolutely.
Now, we're obviously all sort of in a little bit of a bubble. You all follow retail and e-commerce very closely. We're all in the general tech bubble a little bit. We may follow it on Twitter or LinkedIn or so forth. So we've heard about these supply chain issues for a long time. How much do you all think has this arrived? How much do general consumers know about it these days? Is it for them, is it a shock where they go into the stores and then they can't find it, so they run to the next store? Have they started to shop earlier? What are your sort of general impressions? What do you think? How aware are people and how much frustration is ahead for them as they can't find things? And whoever wants to take that, let's just open this up.
Yeah, I think there's been a fairly widespread general awareness of it just because it's been in the news cycle fairly frequently. And there's been lots of discussions about empty shelves and supply chain issues. I would say we've noticed the trend over the last few days of a softness in sales compared to last year's online sales. And it feels like a lot of that is because more activity is in the physical stores right now, because people want to go where they can actually put their hands on the product to make sure that they get it. Whereas if you order online, maybe you find out a week later it's back ordered or it's going to ship late. And so I think that's a little bit of what's happening now, is that that consumers have shifted more to the to the physical stores to make sure they can get some of those items like the PS5 you mentioned. I'm hoping at least that we see that shift back to e-commerce a bit here in the next few weeks, as people are just trying to kind of fill in with the stocking stuffers and things. But I think there's a pretty widespread consumer knowledge of at least a basic level that there are some issues there.
Weber, do you see that too? Are people maybe coming more to your stores to check things out? Obviously, you don't sell the PS5, but you sell things that may be a good alternative to it. So, is there a silver lining here for retailers like you?
Yeah, I mean, what we've noticed is, I think I mentioned this too on the phone about Black Friday. I mean, for us, Black Friday has never been as important as probably like the 2 weeks leading up to Christmas. If you look at our numbers, our biggest days of the year typically are the last weekend before Christmas and the weekend, the second weekend before Christmas as well. So I suspect we're going to have a massive influx of people who shop late and realize that they can't get anything in time. The thing I've noticed is that people were shopping earlier for sure in October and November. There's a lot of awareness of this issue, I always am. I actually, to be honest with you, like maybe 2 months ago, a reporter from had contacted me and asked me about supply chain issues, and I was a little bit skeptical about the realness, because a lot of brands like to communicate how bad their supply chain issues are, because it drives some kind of urgency. And this year it is true, for sure. What I noticed, I worked in our store in Houston on Black Friday, and I shouldn't be saying this, but the deals weren't very good this year. I think a lot of brands were withholding some of the kind of 40-50% off sales for another time. And I don't want to say that we don't have the PS5. Maybe we do. You have to come in the store and see. Maybe we have one in the back. I'm not sure.
All right, but I think I noticed that just anecdotally too, looking around Black Friday over the weekend, that you get all these emails these days where somebody promises you 10% off, and that's not ultimately all that much, right? That looks like any other weekend sale or so. Is that
exactly?
Is that true across all e-commerce too, Daryl, that there's just a lot less margin where people can?
Well, nowadays a lot of Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals are what we always called a manufactured deal. It's a spec that the manufacturer makes specifically for that retail store, that maybe is a slightly lower spec, but allows you to hit a price point and show a huge discount. I suspect that an awful lot of those are sitting on containers in Long Beach or sitting off the coast of Long Beach. And so a lot of these planned promotions simply couldn't happen because the inventory didn't arrive in time. And so what was available in the channel is their actual product, not the specific SKU that they manufactured to be the deal price. And neither the retailer nor the manufacturer has the margin to apply a 40% discount. So I think that means a couple of things. One, consumers are probably going to be a little bit disappointed that those aggressive deals aren't available now. But in January, when all of that inventory finally hits, manufacturers are going to have to do something with that inventory. And so I suspect that those deals will be around in Q1, and you'll see them pop up on some deal sites as they're priced aggressively, because now the manufacturer is way out of their plan. They had a sales plan to move that inventory in November, December, and their CFO is not going to let them keep it on the books. They're going to have to get rid of that product. So they will surface eventually. It's just not going to be in time for Christmas, I'm afraid, for most people.
So all we have to do is just delay Christmas by 2 months. And
I'm not saying that. No, definitely, consumers should definitely go shop right now. But that's going back to the Woot days. That is that is one of the things that Woot thrived on was, an opportunity that was presented because a manufacturer either forecasted wrong, they planned wrong, they missed a shipment date. Big retailers like Walmart are notorious for you deliver the product by November 30th or we cancel the PO. And so maybe they're being a little generous with that this year, but there are a lot of retailers that will just simply cancel the PO when the product doesn't arrive on time. Manufacturers got to do something with that product. And if they bought 10,000 pieces of something to move on Black Friday, that's a really big piece of their January, February plan. So they're gonna have to be aggressive in discounting that to move it when it arrives.
Emily, do you have any indication from the data that you're looking at how big these usual discounts impact sort of consumer foot traffic and whether when those don't materialize, people change their habits or maybe go to different retailers, or have you seen anything in that regard?
Yeah, it's a little difficult for us to draw the correlation between the in-store discounts and foot traffic, but I did want to echo Daryl's earlier comment about consumers really being hyper aware of the shortage of supply in stores and online, because we are seeing that increasingly consumers are visiting direct competitors in the exact same day that they're visiting their preferred retailers. We're seeing this with hardware stores, we're seeing it with big box stores, we're seeing an increased number of visits to Target in the same exact day as Walmart, just from last year. So the fact that we're seeing that increase year over year does mean that consumers are becoming more and more aware of the issue at hand.
How much do you all think will these issues impact returns and whatever will happen in January? Usually people just return the gifts they maybe don't like or something like that. But I imagine a lot of those things that I wanted to give to people for Christmas and then they arrive January 15th, I will probably return too. So will that be a big issue for e-commerce and maybe for retailers like Beta as well?
We have probably the lowest return rate in the industry in electronics, less than 5%. I don't know. That's really hard to say. But yeah, I mean, I think that people who buy in stores are, generally speaking, less likely to return. That's my guess, even though it's harder to return products online. That when you have a chance to see it and touch it, it changes your awareness of the product, I guess.
And Daryl, for you working with sort of deal sites and so forth, is it just like foregoing this whole return issue altogether because it's just like final sales?
In some cases, yes. If it's something where you're trying to utilize one of the Amazon channels like Goldbox or Lightning Deals, that's going to be something you're going to have to deal with because Amazon's return policy is really open-ended in the holiday season. Anything you buy, I think from October 1st through December 31st, you can return all the way into February. So it's a really broad window. I think really the only place where that will come back to hurt retailers is if they do get that product in January and do discounts in January. They're going to be stuck in a situation where either they have to price match, or the consumers that really want that savings, they're going to return the more expensive item they bought in December to buy the cheap item in January. So I think you're going to see a lot of jockeying to make sure that retailers don't, and manufacturers don't present that issue for themselves until after that return period is closed. But either way, it does kind of present, an opportunity for the deal segment because there are a lot of, open box returns that end up getting refurbished and pushed back into the channel, and those move pretty heavily through deal sites. So, whether it's the excess inventory that arrived too late that becomes the opportunity, or whether it's the returns that are generated because of that in January, either way, it's eventually it becomes a win for that that deal segment, because they're really primed to take advantage of either of those situations.
So going back for a second to the discounts and the ability to give those discounts, I did notice that the few companies that are able to more heavily discount or give the usual discounts are the usual big guys. So Amazon is still selling their devices for fairly cheap. Google is still selling speakers for half off because they have more of an ability to, I guess, get a lot of stock and maybe pull that stock from containers, from yards and so forth, as Daryl already described. So what are then some opportunities for some of the smaller guys to still stand out, to still compete in this environment, and both online as well as in retail stores? What can you do to even compete with guys like Amazon these days?
I would say the first rule of thumb is don't try to compete with Amazon or Google. But if you end up in that position, there are some things you can do. The first being, you can just make a better product. I would think Vibhu would probably agree with that, in that, Amazon and Google make a nice product, but they don't make a high-end product. They make a generally acceptable product for the masses. And so when I said don't compete with them, that's really one of the key ways of doing it, is differentiating your product and making something that's just flat out better. Whether it's a speaker, there are plenty of brands that have found themselves kind of competing with Amazon and Google in that area. They make a far superior product that, an Echo or a Google speaker just can't compete with. So I think that's really the main thing is, I think those guys are mostly kind of direct to consumer sales anyway. And so, just finding the right way to speak to your customer about the differences is the prime thing. And those guys are really set up to do that without having to put so much of a discount in there, like Sonos being an example. I think if you look at what their promos were this year compared to last year, they didn't discount quite as much, but they also don't have to, because it's a top tier brand.
I think they basically were lucky if they had enough stock at all, even for the regular price at this point.
Yeah.
But Vibhu, speaking to that point of speaking more directly to customers and also catching them where they are, you were already mentioning at the beginning that you sort of pivoted your website a little bit to be very video focused. Is that sort of an attempt to get the Zoom generation, or get everybody who's been used to being on video all the time and have more personal conversations on video, channel that back to retail or catch those consumers as well?
Right. So we during the pandemic, we started experimenting with video, and we produced thousands and thousands of hours of content in the last year. Coming to this holiday season, we retrofitted some. If you come into our stores in the Bay Area, you'll actually see we have broadcast studios we built into the stores where we're casting. And what we found is just people, especially young people, and actually it's a cross-generational thing. People love video. They love engaging with things that are live or as live. It lifted engagement rates, 3-4x from what they used to be on our site. What's amazing about live in particular is you can do creative, to your question about discounting, you can do really creative things that are kind of time bound and available to the people who are watching. So we've done a lot of giveaways and bundles. You'll see this maybe today or next couple of days. We have a Spotlight brand that we're going to run an all-day stream for, and we've worked together with those companies to create really special bundles, maybe even cross brand type of promotions, right? So maybe you have a product that's in really high demand, they have a lot of pricing power, and we couple that with something that's a little bit less unknown and can give a little bit of room there. So we're being really creative. We're all in on video. It's been huge for us. It's definitely the future of experiential in my mind.
So are you in a way sort of reinventing QVC then?
Yeah, brought to you by the team that reinvented Sharper Image. We love QVC, just to be clear. Disclaimer, they're an investor in the company. But video shopping works. People love tuning in and shopping. We've always viewed shopping as entertainment. The transaction, we don't compete with Amazon. If people want to go buy on Amazon, that's great. After they shop with us. So anything we can do to make all of our channels more fun to play with, we'll do. So yeah, I'm happy to be called Next Gen QVC.
All right, Emily, what kind of recommendations are you giving retailers these days on how to stand out and compete and deal with all these issues and maybe take the steam out of frustrated shoppers that can't find the PS5?
Yeah, I think, if the pandemic has taught us anything over the past 2 years, it's that we're in this constant state of evolution. And so the new normal is constantly being redefined by a number of factors. The recent variant that we heard about recently, the impact of seasonal moments and holidays throughout the year, where we're always going to see foot traffic patterns react accordingly, as well as what we're seeing with supply chain disruption at the moment. So there's a number of factors that are constantly impacting consumer behavior in real time. And so we've been keeping a constant pulse on that. We've been putting out monthly COVID reports that trace back the recovery patterns of foot traffic to different verticals across retail, dining, nightlife, entertainment, to understand how that behavior is changing over time. And so we help our brands and marketers respond accordingly to those changes that we're seeing as we see them.
And do you have like one big piece of advice that people should take? Or I know you're talking a lot to bigger retailers, but is there like a nugget also maybe for the small guys, for the mom and pop shops to take away from all of this?
Certainly there's a lot to take away from it, but I think it's just really paying attention to the nuances. So, there's so many different ways that we can look at foot traffic, geographical differences, demographic differences. And so really understanding who your audience is now versus who they were prior to COVID, and understanding how to reach them and how to identify them.
That makes a lot of sense. Emily already mentioned the latest variant, and there's a lot of unknowns about this, and I'm not going to ask you all to become armchair virologists right now, but I just wanted to bring that up because it's always easy to say, so how much of this will persist when all of this is over? And that was one of my questions I had on my paper here, but then I realized, well, will this actually be over anytime soon? We don't even know that. So maybe we can still, regardless, put on our visionary hat for a second, and I can ask each of you to sort of give me an idea of how much of these changing behaviors will persist in the future, in the late pandemic future and the post-pandemic future. How will all of this change shopping going forward, and how much of what consumers are doing now as they're still trying to figure things out will be part of shopping in the future? And maybe we can do like one round or something. And Daryl, do you want to start maybe?
Sure. I think the only constant is change. And so I think maybe what we'll see is a little bit of a pendulum swing. Last year, everybody, had to stay in. That was the thing. Work from home became the Zoom lifestyle. This year, people were fed up with that. And so the pendulum swung to the other side, where I think there's a lot of people going to physical retail. And then obviously all of the supply chain issues have kind of exacerbated that a little bit and made that more of a swing. And then I think it's going to swing back the other way at some point. But I think we won't see as extreme of reactions as we have in the past. Last year, COVID was a brand new unknown thing, and now we know a whole lot more. Even the parts where we don't know, we still know more. So I think even with new variants coming along, there's going to be some resistance to not reacting the same way we did in the past. So I think I guess that's a really long way of saying we'll see what happens. But I think things are going to switch back to e-commerce, but then also back to retail. It's just going to be more of the same. It's going to be that dynamic switching back and forth for forever, basically. So.
And Weber, what do you think about how this is going to evolve over the next couple of months? And maybe also, how are you preparing with your company to be ready for whatever is coming next?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we spent 18 months trying to figure out how to keep people safe, shoppers and employees, and most of those measures, we haven't taken off the table yet. You're still masked up in our stores, and I think depending on locale, we customers may or may not be required. I think we're not concerned about being able to quickly roll out measures if need be, but sometime my mindset kind of flipped late last year from waiting for the end to imagining probably we're living with this forever in some fashion. Maybe it will become less of like a story. We don't have a lot of media attention around I'm not saying that COVID is the flu, but we don't talk about the flu vaccine that they develop every year and send out to everyone, right? It's just something that we are asked to do, and many people do. I think that's coming, but without trying to imagine what the future is, it's very easy. We already knew when we started the company 7 years ago, traffic to stores is going to go down over time. And people are moving, in this last year, a lot of people change their behaviors around shopping, right? Permanently, including us, my family. So we knew that the key thing for us as kind of a startup was making sure that that experience in the store was valuable, even if there are fewer people coming in to experience it. I think we've introduced a massive hedge in our physical strategy as well with video, which our video audience today is 10 times larger than our store audience was pre-COVID. So we've embraced new formats. We're still even video is a physically created thing, so we haven't dropped physical at all. But we're kind of ready for whatever comes next. We'll see.
All right, and last but not least, Emily, I know you're still crunching the numbers from last weekend, and it still takes some time to get to the bottom of all of that. But are you starting to see sort of behaviors where you think they could persist? Maybe people going shopping through larger windows of time of the day, or anything that you think we will see next year and maybe in the years to come as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And to echo some of Daryl's comments, we are seeing that there's pent up demand to return to this sense of normalcy. We see that traffic to, normal things like going to movie theaters, going to sporting events has started to pick up, and we're seeing sustained growth month over month. But there are lasting impacts that I think we'll see, for a good amount of time. One being the fact that consumers' professional and personal lives and routines have completely evolved over the past 2 years. So a lot of people are still working remotely. They're no longer using that commuting time to and from work to run their errands. And so we've seen an uptick in traffic to a lot of retail stores throughout the day, and sustained traffic throughout the day versus early in the morning or late in the evening. Similar trends across dining as well. We also have been paying really close attention to dwell time patterns. We noticed that a lot of people are spending less time in stores, likely taking advantage of, renewed focus in things like online purchase for curbside pickup. Similar with dining, we're seeing that more people are taking advantage of drive-thrus. So I think there's certain cues that we've seen sustained throughout the past year that I think we'll continue to see moving forward.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, we're almost out of time now. It was really fascinating discussion, but I want to just briefly ask each of you one personal question. Weber already queued that up a little bit, because I want to know how each of you have changed your shopping. And I don't know if you celebrate the holidays or not, but everybody has to buy something. We all eat. So how have you switched things? How are you approaching the holiday season? What's different with your shopping? And maybe if you have any tips for people out there looking to still get their presents. Daryl, let's start with you. Let's keep this short, 2-3 sentences for each of you.
Sure. I've always done most of online shopping, or most of my shopping online. And this year I've definitely felt a desire to go out and do shopping at physical stores. So we've begun kind of incorporating that and made that like some weekend trips to go to the mall and go to, we've got a big sporting goods store here called Shields. That's, a massive sporting goods store with all kinds of stuff. So kind of turning it into a little bit of an event and adventure, as opposed to sitting on the couch and surfing for some gifts.
Vivo, what about you? Don't tell me you're just shopping at Better.
Please shop at small retailers. We're really, really affected by the last 18 months. If you are thinking about going to Target or Walmart, just consider if there's anything that's smaller where you can get something similar, maybe represent smaller brands as well. We need that help. I know small businesses all over the country need that help. And you said products, and there's only one product that's in my view that I use every day and love, and I'm going to try to let's see if I can zoom in. This is the incredible Sing speaker. It's, in my mind, probably the best speaker ever made. You gotta check it out. SYNG. You can buy it at Beta.
All right.
Sorry for the shill.
That is totally fine. Last but not least, Emily, what about your holiday or general shopping habits? How are you shopping these days?
Yeah, I really haven't changed too much about my shopping behavior. I'd say I still do a majority of my shopping online, and that hasn't really changed too much this holiday season. But I will say, as like a recent mover, recently relocated, I have found that I've spent a lot more time shopping in stores, searching for the right couch, the right dining table. So a lot of things that have brought me into stores more than usual.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much. Thanks to all of you for joining us. It reminded me that I still have to do a whole lot of shopping this holiday season. Every year I tell myself I'm going to do it earlier. And even though I read about the supply chain, even though I wrote about it, still haven't done everything. So I have to get to that. And we are at the end of time for the panel. So thanks again to our panelists, and thanks for everybody for tuning in. If you want to learn more about our future events, you can go to protocol.com/events. And while you're on protocol.com, please sign up for my newsletter, Protocol Next Up, every week about the future of technology and entertainment. And again, if you're celebrating the holidays or not, have a peaceful and safe season, and go out and do some shopping, support some small retailers, do some online shopping, and just have fun with it.